Hello again and welcome back to the beginning of this final module in the Teacher Freedom Programme, which I have named Accelerated Lesson Planning, because in your time as a teacher you are going to be designing and planning many lessons in your career, and if you can learn some ways to speed this up, it's going to help you out hugely with your workload. I'm going to share in this module really kind of boils back down to one thing, and that is this concept of resourcefulness. Making the best use of the resources that you already have at your disposal. So let me start by telling you about a time when I had to be super resourceful and where I learned to be resourceful because I had no other option. So when I started my job as a head of department, I led a really successful geography department for 5 years. And when I first started the role, I literally walked in on day one, my first teaching day, and I saw that whoever the geography department were that left before me, they had wiped all of the resources, all of the lessons gone, all the assessments gone, all the homework's gone. And I don't know why. Maybe they held a grudge or something. I never got to the bottom of the story, but I had to literally start from scratch with everything. So I had a mad year where I had to plan every lesson, every scheme of work for all 5 year groups, 7 to 11 again. And I couldn't sit down and plan all those lessons by myself. That was impossible. So I learned to be resourceful and use these 5 areas I'm going to talk to you about to help build out the first curriculum, and which I improved as I went along. I swapped things out, swapped things in, but it was just a case of survival mode and in getting something done that was there to teach the kids. And I'm going to talk about time first as our first resource. So time is your most precious resource. It's the reason that you're here on this course. You want more of it, yeah? You don't want less of it. So let's just talk about how time can be a resource that you are using, efficiently. So one of the things that's really important is when you're planning a lesson, is make sure that when you plan that lesson, you're going to plan it once. You're not going to keep coming back to it and changing it. So make sure that the lesson that you're planning is sustainable for the future. So what I mean by that is when you revisit this lesson that you're planning this time next year and you look at it, make sure you're going to want to teach it again. Don't give yourself so many card sorts to cut out, things to glue and stick out, prepare for the kids, things to photocopy, that you're going to look at that and go, oh, nah, why did I design it that way? Make sure it's sustainable. Other things that you need to be aware of is that you want to be modeling successful people, and the most successful people in the world are so resourceful with their time. And what you'll find that they do is that they build on the work of other people. They realize that they're not the best person to produce everything themselves. So they take what someone's already done and they build on that, and then they make something with that. And that is what you should be doing as a teacher. Okay, you should be finding a lesson or a worksheet on tests or a textbook page or activity and building on that foundation of work to make your lesson. Building on things that are already there to make it quicker and easier to make your lesson. And so often we overlook these free resources that we have at our disposal. I'm going to talk about that in another video. Okay, also with time, I want you to chunk your time. So if you have a lesson to plan, I want you to mentally give yourself a time amount that you're prepared to plan this lesson. It could be 10 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, it could be 40 minutes. And you need to stick to that time. So if you know you've only got 10 minutes to plan a lesson because you want to be out the door at 4 o'clock, or you've got to be somewhere to pick up your kid after school, that's it. That's what you have, 10 minutes to plan that lesson. And go to a resource accordingly for that. So 10 minutes, you're going to go to a textbook, pad it out and do a couple of things to kind of jazz it up. If you have half an hour, you might use that time to find a lesson on tests or an activity that you can tweak and make for your own from one of the Teach It websites, for example, which is a great website that I'm going to show you in a subsequent video. So make sure that your lessons are sustainable, that you're going to want to teach them year in, year out. And another thing I want to mention with time is, and I've done this often as a head of department, is if you are producing lessons. Let's say you're producing a new scheme of work, and let's say it's for year 8, but it could also be taught successfully to another year group, maybe year 7 or year 9. Then deliver that lesson, deliver that scheme of work to both year groups simultaneously, okay? Because it will help them, and also it will help you, because you've reduced your planning. You're going to use that lesson with 2 year groups and not just 1. So for example, I made a really brilliant scheme of work on the Galapagos Islands a few years ago, using a great existing resource that was an organisation had already done, and I just tweaked it and padded it out. And I thought, this is such a great scheme of work and lessons. I'm going to teach it to year 8, who it's intended for, and I'm also going to teach it to year 9, because then year 9 are not going to go back through year 8. They're not going to get the chance to be taught it. So I taught it to both these year groups, and it freed up so much of my time, because I was teaching that same lesson, you know, maybe 3-4 times in a week. And so it was really easy for me to kind of get ahead and get other things done. So think about, can you teach new schemes of work to more than 1 year group at the same time? Something to think about. So moving on to the next resource that you have, I'm going to look at skills. What skills do you already have that you are really good at? I'm not a technology person. Tech is like an alien, different language to me. But what I am creative. And so I will use that to full effect with my lessons. I like to teach creative lessons where kids get to be creative. I like drawing things, like I draw out mind maps, and what I do for revision is I get my class to reproduce the mind map. So I just start them off and draw a little bit filled in, and then they'd go and copy the rest and fill in from there. So whatever your strengths are as a person, you use those when you're planning for your lesson. Don't try and force yourself to learn all this new software if you know it's going to be an absolute pain for you to implement it, and leave that to another member of your department. The next thing I want to talk about is contacts or people in your network, people that you know that can help you with lesson planning. So do you have any colleagues or any friends in industry, for example, that you could bring in to do a talk or a workshop to your classes? You'd find actually that the people might be willing to do that. I had a climate change friend of a friend who came to do an amazing workshop with my Key Stage 4 students a while back on climate change. He was a climate change scientist, and it was brilliant because I didn't have to plan the lesson, and they were like getting this subject information from the horse's mouth. Yeah, it was like the most up-to-date information on climate change, and it was a brilliant success. So think about who you can leverage in your network to either come and talk to your class or help you produce a resource. There'll be lots of people out there that might be able to help you. And if you're not on LinkedIn, that might be a good place to start building up your network for these resources. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is money. Now, we all know that money is in high demand and short supply, and no more so than schools. And what I do not want you to do as teachers, I do not want you to spend your own money, okay? I'm talking about going to your head of department and asking for budget for schemes of work or lesson planning. So if part of your performance management is you've been given the scheme of work to replace or update, I want you to think about, can you go and buy resources? Can you find an excellent scheme of work online that you can buy in to make your life easier? Don't just assume that you've got to put the graft in and you've got to make everything from scratch. Ask for the money. And if your subject leader doesn't have the money, go above their head. Find out if there's like a more general pot of money that the school have got that you could tap into. Maybe a pupil premium pot of money, for example. But if you don't ask, you will not get. It could be as simple as buying in some CGP or ready-made printed student workbooks that they can work through on a topic that is relevant to what you're updating. So think about buying in resources. And lastly, I want you to think about what existing classroom resources that you already have. And things like Play-Doh or boxes of Lego or textbooks are such an overlooked resource, and I'm going to do another video on textbooks because there are some superb stuff that probably is sitting on a shelf gathering dust that you've never even seen. So I'm going to be prompting you to look at textbooks as a resource as well. So hopefully you've got those 5 things down. They will be summarized in your workbook. I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of writing just to think about what resources you already have at your disposal, to get you thinking about how you can be using these moving forward more effectively, and stop kind of defaulting to using your time as the only resource that's available to make lessons. And I will look forward to sharing more about these things that you can do in the next videos.